Okay, the focus of this video is going to be formatting code and just kind of a reminder of how to structure Arduino code, and this will probably be the last video that we do that's just focused on coding and writing code, and we'll get back to circuits on the next one. But the first thing is just a reminder of what a basic Arduino program looks like. Okay, so we have the setup loop, and you might see it like this, you might see it like that with the brackets. Either way, that's our setup loop. And then we have, or our setup rather, function, and then we have our loop function. Okay, the setup runs once, the loop runs forever. Okay, or at least until it's turned on. Okay, you can verify it, check and see. Alright, so this is all that a program needs. This is not a very useful program because it doesn't do anything. Okay, and let's go ahead and make this a blink program. So we're going to add a variable for the LED and say it's on maybe pin 13. Then we're going to set that LED to output. Alright, so let's see, pin mode. That's what we want. And what I'm thinking I'll do is I'll put together maybe a list of let's see, make sure I did that right. Oh, forgot to put a T right here. And then we will go ahead and, so anyway, I'm going to put together a list of maybe some of these basic components that you are basically kind of have a resource to fall back on. So digital write, we'll set it as turn it on and off. We'll make it blink for a second. There we go. So here's our blink sketch. Now, the reason I wanted to type this up is because I want to show you a couple ways we can write this. Okay? And the focus of this video is going to be something called whitespace. Okay? Whitespace is all the gaps in between letters. Okay? So you have like a line skipped here, and then you have this like tab right there. Okay? You have tabs here, and so on. Now, the purpose of whitespace depends on the programming language you're using. With this language, it's basically there to help you understand what's going on, because we could take this program and put it all on one line. Okay? And it should still work. Okay? We'll click verify, and it still works. Okay? But this program, and I could run it and it would make the LED blink on pin 13. But this is really difficult to read. Okay? And so what we do is, after every semicolon, we skip a line. Okay? And not just after semicolons, when you're within something called a function. Okay, so this is a function, it's got these brackets here. When you're within the function, anything inside the setup function we tab over, kind of as a sign that it's inside of there. So when we get down here to the loop, everything that's in there is going to be tabbed over to show that it's within this loop. Okay? And this loop is anything within these brackets. Okay, you could put the bracket here, you could put it here, you could put it way down here. Okay, we'll verify, see that works too. Alright, see? It's just, there's ways that we can do this that make sense visually, and ways that we can do this that are confusing. But you can put those brackets here or here, and for that matter, I can take this and put it right there, but it makes more sense to me to have it here in between those brackets, tabbed over. Okay? So the next program I'm going to show you is going to be another using if again to make a decision. Okay? Okay, so here's code, a program that's going to just print on the serial monitor the number I, and it's going to count it up by one by one by one. By the way, this line of code here, another way I can write it, if I just want to increment something by one, I can also write it like this. Okay, so sometimes there's multiple ways to communicate something, and this is one of them. This is a shorter way. It's kind of a, I guess like a C++ trick. This might make more sense to you, so it's up to you which way you like to write it. Okay, so what we're going to do though is we're going to make this loop so that it prints, only prints I if I is less than 10. So whenever we want to make a decision, we need to use if. So we're going to say if, and if is kind of like a function in that it's got the brackets like this. But what's a little bit different is we have inside here, we have like a place where we do a little test. And the test here is going to be if I, let's say, is less than or equal to 10. And if I is less than or equal to 10, let's say that we print I. Or maybe let's print, and so let's print maybe some words. Let's say, put quotes here and say I is less than or equal to 10. Now notice though that this is tabbed over again. So since this is within this if statement, we've added another tab, okay, to kind of show visually to ourselves what's going on there. It's contained within these brackets. It's part of that if. Okay, now for an if, you can leave it like that, or if you want to, what it's going to do, it's going to run this loop, it's going to count up I, it's going to print I, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then it's going to stop. If you want it to do something else, when I is not equal to 10, we add an else. Okay, the else here is optional. You don't have to have it, but you can have it if you want. And maybe what we'll say for our else is, so see how I pasted in, it doesn't tab over. So if I wanted to tab over, I can go like that. Let's say in this case, I want to say now that I is more than, or let's say greater than 10. Okay, and so now it's going to print this 10 times, or I guess 11 times, and then it's going to print this until I stop running the program. Okay, and so an if statement is really useful for making decisions. And now at this point you might be wondering, well, why on earth would I want to even make a decision in a program? And here's why. Okay, let's go ahead and do one more program together. Let's say that we have a button on pin 10. Okay, and we'll have our serial monitor set up, and I'm going to say, okay, pin mode, and let's say that our pin mode is going to be, in this case, for the button, a button is a way of communicating. So if I press a button, I want to know that the button is pressed, and I can make a decision based on whether it's pressed. And so instead of setting it to an output, I can set it to an input. Okay, and then I use a different tool. Instead of using digital write, I could do something called digital read. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the button and I'm going to read it. Okay, and what you'll do is maybe create another variable. We'll call it x. We don't need to give it anything. We'll just say it starts at 0. And we're going to say that x is going to be equal to whatever the button reads. Okay, and we'll say serial.print x. Okay, and I guess we'll skip a line here too. Okay, and what it's going to do is basically tell you in the serial monitor whether the button is pressed or not. Okay, so we'll start off this with our next module, and you'll kind of learn on how to press a button. Later, we can do an if statement. So what's going to happen if the button is pressed? It will be equal to 0, or it will be equal to 1. If it's not pressed, it'll be equal to 0. So if we want to say that something is equal to something, we would use 2 equal signs, and then we'll make our bracket. And so maybe we could write a code that says, if the button is turned on, print button pressed. Okay, or maybe later you can write code that says instead of like printing something in the serial monitor, you would potentially maybe write code that would turn on an LED when the button's pressed. Okay. All right. So, and that's how we'll wrap up this video. Okay. Just remember, these tabs and the way that you space stuff out is going to help you visualize the code better. So something that's within this if, we want to tab it over. Something within this else, we want to tab it over. The else here is optional. Okay. And if statements are used for making decisions. All right. But this entire program, if I wanted to, I could write it all on one line. The reason we don't do that is so that it makes more sense to us when we're looking at it. Okay.